Echoes of Wisdom marks a significant shift in the Legend of Zelda series, combining elements of the classic top-down perspective with innovative mechanics introduced during the Wild era. Breath of the Wild, and Tears of the Kingdom, TOTK, revolutionized the franchise by introducing vast open worlds and an unprecedented level of freedom. Though Echoes of Wisdom returns to a more traditional format, it proves that the Zelda series has changed for good, forever shaped by the Wild era's innovations. A return to classic form, with a twist. At first glance, Echoes of Wisdom appears to be a return to the roots of the Zelda franchise. It adopts a top-down perspective and offers a version of Hyrule that closely resembles that of A Link to the Past. This might give longtime fans a sense of nostalgia, especially with the linear storytelling and dungeon crawling experience. However, Echoes of Wisdom refuses to be constrained by the limitations of classic 2D games. Instead, it introduces vertical movement and exploration, which were major features in Breath of the Wild and TOTK. For the first time in a top-down Zelda game, players can scale trees and jump over obstacles, erasing the barriers that once defined the boundaries of 2D games. While it retains the aesthetics of classic Zelda, Echoes of Wisdom pushes the gameplay into a new realm, feeling more like an open-air adventure despite its top-down view. In this sense, it transcends traditional 2D Zelda mechanics, introducing vertical exploration that is unheard of in previous entries. Verticality and creative combat. One of the biggest changes introduced by the Wild era was the freedom of movement and creative approaches to combat. BOTW's and TOTK's open-world mechanics allowed players to engage in combat using physics, traps, and clever strategies beyond simple swordplay. This sense of creativity is fully embraced in Echoes of Wisdom. While it adopts a top-down style, players are not restricted to simple 2D combat. Zelda can now move in 3 dimensions, utilizing echoes, special abilities that add strategic layers to encounters. Interestingly, Zelda starts the game without a sword, forcing players to rely on these echoes. Even when Zelda unlocks the ability to wield a sword through her sword fighter mode, it can only be used sparingly, being tied to a timer. By the time players gain full use of the sword, they will likely be accustomed to a more strategic, echo-based style of combat. This marks a further departure from the traditional sword-centric Zelda formula. The end of 2D Zelda. With Echoes of Wisdom, it is clear that true 2D Zelda is a thing of the past. The Wild era's mechanics, verticality, creative combat, and freedom of movement, have become essential to the franchise's identity. In fact, the only time Echoes of Wisdom truly feels like a 2D game is during its side-scrolling sequences, where Zelda is confined to moving up, down, left, and right. Outside of these brief moments, Echoes of Wisdom feels more like an evolution of the Wild era, expanding what is possible in a top-down game. Combat evolution and the de-emphasis on swordsmanship. The shift away from sword-based combat began in Breath of the Wild, with its weapon durability mechanic teaching players not to rely solely on their swords. TOTK expanded on this concept, allowing players to fuse weapons and objects to create powerful new tools for battle. Echoes of Wisdom takes this idea to its logical conclusion by making the sword almost unnecessary. While the sword is useful in certain situations, such as breaking through specific barriers, the game places much more emphasis on strategic use of echoes and other creative methods to solve problems. The Wild era's permanent impact. The Wild era introduced new mechanics that have now become staples of the Zelda series. Echoes of Wisdom proves that even when the series returns to a more familiar format, it cannot fully escape the influence of Breath of the Wild and TOTK. Vertical exploration, creative combat, and a more open-ended approach to problem-solving have become integral to the Zelda experience. While Echoes of Wisdom may appear to be a throwback to earlier games, it ultimately demonstrates that the Wild era has changed Zelda for good.